What happens when a miracle isn't really a miracle? When survival depends not on luck, but on science, leadership, and impossible decisions. On October 13, 1972, a plane carrying 45 people vanished in the Andes Mountains. For 72 days, the world believed they were dead. But the truth behind how they survived and why they weren't rescued sooner reveals shocking failures, hidden physics, and the strength of human will. This is the untold side of Flight 571. The world's most misunderstood survival story. Right after the crash, three nations, Chile, Argentina, and Uruguay, launched one of the largest aerial search operations in South American history. But within just 8 days, the mission was abandoned. Why? Because even though the planes were flying directly above the wreckage, they couldn't see it. The aircraft of Flight 571 was painted white and silver, the same color as the snow it had crashed into. From above, it perfectly blended into the glacier like camouflage. Search pilots reported no signs of life, but they were only a few kilometers away. To make matters worse, 1970s aviation technology had no GPS, no satellite imaging, and no thermal scanners. Navigation relied on visual landmarks, mountains, valleys, rivers, all of which were hidden by clouds. The Andes range stretched for 7,000 kilometers. The rescuers had to guess which ridge the plane might have hit. Even radio signals gave false readings due to reflections from the mountain walls. So, in technical terms, the survivors weren't lost in the Andes. The rescuers were. Most airplane crashes involve an instant explosion or total disintegration on impact. But Flight 571 was different. As the pilots tried to climb over a ridge, the tail section struck the mountain first. That impact tore the fuselage open, and then something remarkable happened. Instead of exploding, the main cabin detached and began sliding down the glacier like a sled. For nearly 700 meters, it skimmed across ice and snow at over 300 kilometers per hour before coming to a stop. This sliding mechanism, as later confirmed by aviation investigators, actually saved lives. The snow absorbed much of the impact energy, preventing an instant death for everyone on board. In other words, the same glacier that trapped them had also protected them.
Now imagine this. You're trapped at 3,800 meters, surrounded by lifeless white, temperatures below -30 degrees Celsius, no food, no trees, and no radio contact. It wasn't just a fight against nature, it was a battle against their own minds. Within days, the survivors made one of the most disturbing yet rational decisions in human history. They created a pact. If anyone died, their body would become food for the living. It wasn't barbaric, it was mathematical. They calculated that human tissue contained the same nutritional content as beef or fish, and at that altitude, there was no other protein source. This decision didn't come from desperation alone. It came from logic, teamwork, and faith. Leaders like Nando Parrado and Roberto Canessa, both young rugby players, took charge. Their discipline from sports became their survival system. They organized ration schedules, daily routines, and even mental motivation sessions. They didn't just survive the cold, they survived hopelessness.
At that altitude, the air is 40% thinner. Oxygen levels drop so low that your brain starts slowing down. You lose coordination, memory, and sometimes the will to live. Their bodies began consuming their own fat, then muscle tissue. Heart rate fell to near hibernation levels, around 30 beats per minute in some survivors. They melted snow for water, but snow lacks electrolytes, so dehydration continued. Without carbs, their blood sugar dropped dangerously low, making them dizzy and weak. Scientifically, most people die of hypothermia within hours in -30 degrees Celsius temperatures. But the survivors developed a biological adaptation. Their bodies entered a low-energy metabolic mode, similar to what mountaineers experience at Everest's death zone. It was pure human biology in action. No miracle, just physics, chemistry, and mental endurance. 40 days into the ordeal, morale was breaking. That's when leadership made the difference. Parrado and Canessa decided they couldn't wait anymore. They built a sleeping bag out of insulation from the seats, stitched together by an 18-year-old survivor who remembered his mother teaching him to sew. That single act of teamwork gave them warmth for the climb. Then they began walking west, believing Chile was nearby. In truth, they were 90 kilometers off course. Still, they walked.
for 10 days through blizzards, starvation, and oxygen deprivation. Their bodies were broken, but their sense of purpose was intact. They no longer walked to survive, they walked to save others. And that psychological shift from "I must live" to "I must save" is what psychologists today call the survivor's leadership switch.
When Parado finally reached civilization and handed the note that read, "I come from a plane that fell in the mountains," it wasn't just a message, it was proof of the human spirit's power. On December 22, 1972, 16 survivors were rescued after 72 days of isolation. But survival came at a cost. Years later, psychologists diagnosed many with survivor's guilt, the haunting feeling of "why me?" Nando Parado, once an engineering student, went on to become a motivational speaker. He often said, "Death didn't teach me to fear life, it taught me to respect it." Roberto Canessa became a pediatric cardiologist, saving lives for a living. Their bond remains unbreakable, rooted in shared trauma and respect. And their story inspired countless books, movies, and survival studies. But beneath all the fame was a quiet truth: they were never the same again.
If this crash happened today, the outcome would be completely different. Modern aircraft send real-time location beacons through GPS and satellite networks. Rescue teams can track a crash site within minutes using ELT transmitters and thermal imaging drones. Even the search pattern would be algorithmic, using satellite terrain mapping instead of pilot eyesight. Back in 1972, every decision was manual. Today, artificial intelligence and avalanche-penetrating radar could detect the fuselage through snow. So yes, if Flight 571 crashed in 2025, rescue might take 8 to 10 hours, not 72 days. But that raises a new question. If technology saves us today, does that mean we're stronger or weaker than those who relied purely on willpower?
The world called it a miracle, but when you look closely, it wasn't divine intervention. It was physics, biology, and leadership working together. A perfect mix of human intelligence and raw survival instinct. In the end, the Andes didn't give them mercy. They earned it. And maybe that's the real lesson of Flight 571, that miracles don't fall from the sky. We create them, one impossible choice at a time.